Hello, and welcome back to the Eden Roots Nursery channel. Today, we got a little something different. I'm going to be discussing an article. We're going to be discussing a classification of endangered high THC cannabis, Cannabis sativa subspecies indica, domesticates, and their wild relatives by John M. McPartland and Ernest Small. So the whole idea with this article is to really kind of understand cannabis, understand its roots, where it came from, how to classify it, the differences between indica and sativa, and just more proper classification on it and how to better distinguish it, understanding the importance of the purity of their wild relatives and versus hybrid introgression and the damage it's doing to wild species. So here we have is the article. So I've already gone through and highlighted things I think are of the most relevance, the most important to understand, to grasp, and just really what the most relevant information for just most anybody to understand is. So here we have the abstract. Two kinds of drug type cannabis gained layman's terms in the 1980s. Sativa had origins in South Asia, India, with early historical dissemination to Southeast Asia, Africa, and the Americas. Indica had origins in Central Asia, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Turkestan. We have assigned unambiguous taxonomic names to these varieties after examining morphological characters in 1,100 herbarium specimens and analyzing phytochemical and genetic data from the literature in a meta-analysis. Sativa and indica are recognized as Cannabis sativa subspecies indica variation indica and Cannabis sativa subspecies indica variation afghanica, respectively. So, to understand what they're trying to classify the layman's terms for cannabis, sativa, and indica as is, so your sativa, which would be the energizing strain, would be classified as Cannabis sativa subspecies indica variation indica. It's a little counterintuitive because it's sativa, but it has indica variation indica in its name. That's just because of the region it was named in, I believe, because of India. And then your classical indica is variation indica. Cannabis sativa subspecies indica variation afghanica. So if we're talking about an Afghan heirloom, or even like Pakistan, that region, Central Asia, I believe it would be Afghanicus. So let's continue. Their wild growing relatives are Cannabis sativa subspecies indica variation Himalayensis. So this is where you would get your Hindu Kush and your whatnot in the Himalayan mountains there. And Cannabis sativa subspecies indica variation asperima in Central Asia. So those would be like your wild types in Russia and kind of that area there, around that area, in Pakistan, maybe even Kashmir too, I'm not sure. But it depends how central that is. I don't know how central that is though. Where are you? In Central Asia. Natural selection initiated divergence driven by climatic conditions in South and Central Asia. Subsequent domestication drove further phytochemical divergence. South and Central Asian domesticates can be distinguished by tetrahydrocannabinol and cannabidiol content. THC/CBD ratios greater than 7 or less than 7, respectively. Terpenoid profiles, absence or presence of sesquiterpene alcohols, and a suite of morphological characters. The two domesticates have undergone widespread introgressive hybridization in the past 50 years. This has obliterated differences between hybridized sativa and indica currently available. I need to read that one again. This has obliterated differences between hybridized sativa and indica currently available. So that means your modern hybrids right there. All your modern hybrids, that's what it's talking about. Strains alleged to represent sativa and indica are usually based on THC/CBD ratios of plants with undocumented hybrid backgrounds, with so-called indicas often delimited simply on possession of more CBD than sativas. The classification presented there circumscribes and names 4 taxa of cannabis that represent critically endangered reservoirs of germplasm from which modern cannabinoid strains originated and which are in urgent need of conservation. So, get the idea. Basically, taxa here, what they're proposing is that with hopefully the plants being less unambiguous and less just out in the open, and now hopefully with they can be classified, they can be better preserved and conserved in seed banks. So now that we got the abstract out of the way, let's move on to the introduction. Cannabis is an ancient domesticate, a triple use crop. Archaeologists found fruits, seeds, in food context, a kitchen midden with a calibrated radiocarbon date of 8,000 cal BCE. I'm gonna skip citations just because I don't know who they are and it'll take a long time. However, I'm gonna obviously include this article in the description, so for the link to whoever wants to read it themselves and maybe even look through it with me while I talk about it. Evidence of fiber use is nearly as old, although identifying ancient cordage as cannabis or pottery impressions of the same is somewhat subjective. Artifacts from a drug context, burnt residues with cannabinoids and a sensor, date to 500 cal BCE. The Latin name Cannabis sativa is usually attributed to Leonhard Fuchs, but the binomial was actually coined by Ermelo Barbaro between 1480 and 1490, published 23 years after he died. Barbaro, 1516. Carl Linné adopted the binomial in Species Planetarum, the internationally recognized starting point of botanical nomenclature. So this is important because this is obviously the start of obviously botanical nomenclature. So this is when cannabis is being formally recognized. John Baptist Lamarck broke from the Linnaean orthodoxy by recognizing a second species, Cannabis indica, for drug-type plants. Small and Quanquist, 1976, proposed a single-species concept. They separated Taxa by Linnaeus and Lamarck at the rank of subspecies as Cannabis sativa, subspecies sativa, and Cannabis sativa, subspecies indica. The subspecies were circumscribed on the basis of delta-9 tetrahydrocannabinol (THC) content. They defined Cannabis sativa, subspecies sativa, as containing less than 3% THC in dried flowering tops of female pistillate plants, and Cannabis sativa, subspecies indica containing more than 3% THC. Cannabis sativa, subspecies sativa, as containing less than 3% THC in dried flowering tops of female pistillate plants, and Cannabis sativa, subspecies indica, as containing greater than 3% THC. Numerous countries have incorporated the 3% criterion in regulations governing fiber-type hemp plants and drug-type marijuana plants. Now that's important too, because there is a distinct difference between cultivars of plants, which we'll get into more as we continue on. Mandolino quantified DNA polymorphisms in 10 drug and fiber-type varieties. They found more variability between individuals within a variety than between varieties, data that confirmed the existence of a single widely shared gene pool. In a worldwide collection of cannabis, found a low rate of sequence variation. Gilmore found a low rate of sequence variation, approximately 1 polymorphism per 1 kb sequenced DNA, consistent with a single species. So that means that within cannabis populations, you're gonna find way more diversity within phenotypical differences than genotypical differences, which is why hybrids bottleneck so quickly, because you have indicas crossbreeding and inbreeding with indicas, and all you're getting is all these same traits amalgamating back into each other. So that's how bottlenecking happens very quickly, and a very diverse gene pool. This is why diversity is important, because you need two new gene pools to have so much more phenotypical difference happening. But the problem with that, with the modern hybrids, is that they're already bottlenecked, and you introduce these bottlenecked plants into these pure lines, or very robust and domesticated and adapted lines, you're gonna start ruining their gene pool. Let's see. Clearly, Cannabis sativa and Cannabis indica are best differentiated at a subspecies rank. In the 1980s, drug-type plants came to be divided into two categories, widely known by the ubiquitous labels indica and sativa. This vernacular taxonomy became widespread after Anderson, 1980, published a line drawing of the plants. He differentiated indica and sativa by morphology and geographical provenance. As summarized by de Megere and Van Soest, indica applied to plants with broad leaflets, short and compact habit, and early maturation, and there's evidence that landrace ancestors of such plants came from Central Asia, primarily Afghanistan. Sativa applied to plants with narrow leaflets, tall and diffuse habit, and late maturation, and there is evidence that landrace ancestors of such plants came originally from South Asia, primarily India. With early historical distribution to Southeast Asia, Africa, and the Americas. Clark, 1981, accepted Anderson's indica concept for plants from Central Asia. Strains from this area are often used as type examples for cannabis indica. In addition to morphological differences, he noted a phytochemical trait. Central Asian plants uniquely produced an acrid skunk-like aroma. See, so that is where the trademark indica and sativa comes from. It has nothing to do with effects or how it makes you feel. The name doesn't correlate to effect. You heard it right there. That is what indica and sativa originally meant. Clark, 1987, added an organoleptic quality. Plants from Afghanistan produced a slow, flat, dreary high. Referred to Central Asian landraces. Oh, my bad. Healing referred to Central Asian landraces as wide leaflet diameter. Biotypes and landraces of South Asian heritage as narrow leaf diameter biotypes. Wide leaf diameter and narrow leaf diameter biotypes differed in genetics. Hillig, 2005a. Morphology. THC to cannabidiol, CBD ratios, and terpenoid contacts. Content. Recent authors have mistakenly equated the vernacular term sativa with the epithet in the scientific name Cannabis sativa and mistakenly equated the vernacular term indica with the epithet in the scientific name Cannabis indica. Mismatch is first noted by McPartlin, al. 2000. Don't know is an adjective or descriptive phrase expressing a quality characteristic of the person or thing mentioned. And so that's what they did with the terms sativa and indica. Small, 2007, stated that sativa and indica were quite inconsistent with former nomenclature. Linnaeus's type specimen of cannabis sativa is a fiber type hemp plant, not a drug type marijuana, and so the term sativa has been inappropriately applied to drug type plants. Logically, it should be reserved for fiber type hemp. Lamarck described cannabis indica for drug type plants from India and progenies in Southeast Asia and Africa, now counterintuitively called sativa. Logically, indica should be reserved for the drug plants described by Lamarck. So what they're proposing right there is saying instead of saying sativa type plants are from this location or that location, they're saying it should be on the type of cultivar it is. So if it's a hemp cultivar or if it's a drug type cultivar, and they want to propose hemp type cultivars be sativa, okay, and marijuana drug type cultivars are indicas. So it kind of really disseminating the whole idea of sativa and indica, or basing the effects off of just those names. No. If we're gonna talk about it now, it should be describing what type of plant you have. Oh, I have a sativa type plant, meaning I have a hemp cultivar, or I have an indica type plant, meaning a drug type cultivar. Little counterintuitive from what we've had, just I guess throughout history, but I mean it makes a lot more sense than just this whole malarkey that is the nomenclature to begin with. Oh. Those unfamiliar with the complexities and subtleties of biological classification can be misled, but in principle, the issue is simple. The terms sativa and indica have been employed ambiguously and contradictorily. In past centuries, land races of South Asian heritage were grown over a much wider geographical range around the world than Central Asian land races. The latter did not come to the attention of Western cannabis breeders until the early 1970s. Since then, breeders have haphazardly hybridized Central Asian and South Asian land races, and largely obliterated their phenotypic differences. You heard it right there too. It hasn't been until recent times that haphazard breeding has made hybrid integration terrible. This is why, if we were just smart with our breeding going forward, we can preserve these great plants. Alarmingly, Central and South Asian land races have been corrupted by the introduction of foreign germplasm into their centers of diversity. Beisler, 2006, boasted of importing Mexican gold into Afghanistan around 1972. Cassano, 2005, noted that Afghani land races were, quote-unquote, disappearing due to hybridization with the other drug-type plants. Conversely, Central Asian land races were introduced into South Asian centers of diversity in the 1970s, into Nepal, Cherniak, 1982, Jamaica, Lamb, 2010, and Thailand, Clark and Merlin, 2016. By 1980, Afghani land races were imported into southern Kashmir, cultivated for sieved hashish, and escapes grew near crop fields. Also in the 1980s, Central Asian genetics were introduced into South Africa and Morocco. Sharma wrote about hybrid cannabis growing in Kulu, Himachal Pradesh, and he implicated foreign nationals. Central and South Asian land races face extinction through introgressive hybridization. I need to say that one again for people in the back. Central and South Asian land races face extinction through introgressive hybridization. That is a big, big problem because you're wiping out diversity within the plant. This is not good. Wigand, 1935, first described this phenomenon in plants. Introgression refers to the infiltration of genes between taxa through the bridge of F1 hybrids. Fertile offspring from these crosses may display hybrid vigor, enhance fitness, and replace one or both parental populations. This is how it's happening so quickly across these places. It's because of these F1s. And a lot of seed banks, modern hybrid seed banks, are only chucking out F1s. Very, very seldom are you getting very worked lines anymore. A lot of F1s are just being thrown out and being called bred or what have you, when you can hardly call that breeding. And then that hybrid contamination is happening in these Asian countries, and people don't necessarily know any better, right? Because you're just growing a plant. Who cares if a little bit of pollen escapes, or maybe if you start sowing some female seeds and they start hybridizing with the local landrace, right? Doesn't matter, but these all have an effect. Recent phylogenetic studies of populations allegedly representing indica and sativa show little or no genetic differences because these studies primarily analyzed hybrid strains. These results conflict with studies of land races collected in the 1970s to 1990s, which showed much clearer genetic differences. This is why preserving your heirlooms and inbred lines is important as well, because we don't have to go far back. We can still have the hybrids that we love today, but we have to have them in their purest form. So your Northern Lights, your Haze, your Colombian Gold, your Panama Red, I don't know. These things. We can have them. They're great. We just need to bring it back a few generations so that we're not hitting that bottleneck and reintroduce back South Asian varieties. The use of strain names for indica sativa hybrids began with Watson, 1985. A database of strain names currently lists 14,348 of them. Seedfinder, 2019. This is a great website if you want to look up any kind of plants or strain you might have that might be in the galaxy. This crowdsourced enterprise, crossing and recrossing hybrids of largely clandestine parentage, has resulted in a loss of genetic diversity. Most strains sold by seed companies are characterized as sativa dominant or indica dominant. The arbitrariness of these designations is illustrated by AK-47, a hybrid strain that won Best Sativa in the 1999 Cannabis Cup and won Best Indica 4 years later. Conceptually, a strain is equivalent to a cultivar, the latter being a taxonomic rank recognized by the International Code of Nomenclature of Cultivated Plants. So this is important when we're talking about just really trying to get on the same page and just what we're talking about. Yeah, really. So pretty much, like, if you want to get technical, using cultivar is probably the right term rather than strain, talking about two different phenotypic plants, probably even genotypic too. However, few commercial strains of drug-type cannabis have met ICN-CP requirements for cultivar recognition. That's funny. I think that has to do with the whole barely even being bred thing. The ICN-CP clusters cultivars into groups. Consistent with ICN-CP requirements, Small 2015 designated Central Asian land races as Cannabis Group Narcotic THC/CBD balanced and South Asian land races as Cannabis Group Narcotic THC predominant. So there you go. You have your Central Asian plants, which are Afghanicas. They're in their own cultivar group called Narcotic THC CBD balanced, and your indicas, the South Asian land races are narcotic THC predominant. Cannabis wild type traits were first described by Zinger 1898. Small 18 means seed, by the way. Small seed size, a persistent perianth with camouflagic modeling and an elongated base. Drawn out in the shape of a short tapered stub with a well-developed oaked abscission layer. So if you can think of a cannabis seed, just really think of it and just look at the details. And that's kind of what it's describing here, just its small details. In contrast, domesticated plants express a suite of phenotypic traits, the domestication syndrome, absent in wild-type plants such as enlarged seed size, a lack of seed shattering from reduction of the abscission zone, and reduction of perianth adherence. Domesticated cannabis easily escapes cultivation and goes feral. Domesticated cannabis sativa reverted to a wild-type phenotype in Canada just 50 years after cultivation was prohibited, 1975. This is important to remember in your head. This rapid phenotypic evolution makes it difficult to distinguish truly wild plants from formerly cultivated plants that have reverted to wild-type phenotypes. Now, why that's important is because cannabis has been selected and bred for millennia, domesticated forever. Humans have been using cannabis for seed, food, fiber, medicine for many years. So who knows if there's truly actually any wild, undomesticated, untouched plants left. We don't know. Thus, cannabis plants growing outside of cultivation could be 1. Volunteers escaped very recently from cultivation, maintaining their domesticated characteristics and growing near where they were cultivated. 2. Escapes that have readapted to wild existence, growing in various habitats, typically in disturbed or weedy places. Or 3. Aboriginal, unaltered by domestication and growing in their indigenous areas. Aboriginal populations of several of the world's most important crops do not seem to have survived, and cannabis may be of this nature. Regardless, the wild-growing plants of Asia that are near sympatric or parapatric to the domesticates are of special significance. So that means the wild-type plants that are growing in these hotspots where you typically have your cultivated regions are important. The wild type plants around there are important because they're probably ancestors of the original plants that were growing there. They may be direct ancestors of the domesticates, although this remains to be ascertained. Many ancient domesticates were domesticated in locations distant from their sites of origin. In any event, there is considerable likelihood that the nearby wild plants of the domesticates share genes, since cannabis produces massive quantities of pollen that is distributed for vast distances, and all cannabis populations are capable of cross-pollination and completely interfertile. Small, 1972. Accordingly, the wild varieties recognized in this publication represent very significant potential sources of genes representative of the endangered sativa and indica genomes. So, start preserving the wild types over highly domesticating different species. That's kind of what it has to do. We gotta save the little seeds, the little guys, the ones who need more attention. This study does not address the European subspecies Cannabis sativa, subspecies sativa. Small and Quanquist, 1976, segregated this subspecies into two varieties, domesticated and wild-type plants. The domesticated variety is composed of fiber-type and oilseed landraces and cultivars. The wild-type variety has collateral issues regarding Cannabis sativa variation spontanea. And Vavilov, 1922, and Cannabis ruderalis, Janiszewski, 1924. Vavilov and Janiszewski assigned these separate taxa to the same population of wild-type plants grown near Saratov, Russia. Ruderalis has become a mainstay of today's vernacular taxonomy. Worldwide introgressive hybridization of indica and sativa threatens the agrodiversity of Cannabis sativa. Seen pessimistically, the varieties described here are components of a vanishing world, and classifying them is like an exercise in renaming dinosaurs. Optimistically, the formal recognition of indigenous Central and South Asian varieties will provide them with unambiguous names and may help prevent their extinction. Basically, right there, it's saying it might be futile to trying to be classifying these plants and giving them so much attention, and that it's not going to work to preserve them, but it's saying you should, and hopefully with the attention that it is getting and the reclassifying and the formalization of it, that you will help in the preservation of this plant. Alright. Oh, so it looks like we're starting to get into the morphology of the plant. Yeah, so that was I don't know what you would call that. I guess that was the kind of bit of the history of cannabis right there and its origins. Yeah, so I'll probably leave this as one video and then just do a bunch of separate videos, because this one is already very long, my longest video yet, but it has to be said. These have to be understood. You know, someone has to put it in a more digestible fashion. And I know I'm talking a lot, but it's good to have a bit of understanding and context. And I feel like I'm able to provide some when some context might not be understood. So please stay tuned for part 2, 3, I don't know how many parts it will take, but however many is necessary, I will get through it all. And yeah, just talk about it more. So, hope you enjoyed. Please watch the next video, and however many more after that, I don't know. But just absorb this information, re-watch this video, re-listen to it. You don't even have to watch, you can just listen to this. Read the paper yourself. Understand what is happening in this paper. Understand what's being said. Read the whole paper. I've only just gone through and highlighted most relevancy, in my opinion, to the average person. Read it yourself, understand it. If you enjoyed, please like, share, comment. Yeah, but I'll see you in the next video. Peace out.